Hey, what's up guys? Note Investor here. Taking a quick look at the markets. We saw a big pop last night over the markets. Bitcoin had a huge short squeeze. You can see here going to the 5-minute candles. It was a very quick move in a very short period of time. We went from 6470 up to over 6800 in 10 minutes, and actually less than 10 minutes. And it was a very big pop, big short squeeze. And you know, it's real curious. I'm not saying there's manipulation or anything, but it's very interesting to see that this happened just as Bitmex was going down for maintenance. There was a lot of shorts that were caught off guard, and you saw that big short squeeze. So a few folks got wrecked in that, I am sure. But this market is moving very interestingly here as we head into some news tomorrow, going into that ETF approval / denial, which right now the sentiment, most polls, it's like a 70-30 deny versus approve percentage. So the vast majority of traders, investors are expecting that ETF to be denied. So the interesting thing is going to be, how does the market react when the news is finally public, one way or the other? Will we see a big sell-off even if everyone's expecting a denial, or will we see a fake out and then a big pop to the upside? The interesting thing to note here is the shorts. If we go look at the BTC shorts, looking at the daily chart, you can see we've had this huge run up in shorts. We've hit new record levels, basically right back at those April highs. And the last time we saw this big short squeeze was at these same levels. And so it's going to be interesting to see if these shorts continue to pile up going into that news. If everyone expects that the ETF is going to be denied and prices will drop subsequently, then it makes sense that people are wanting to go short there. But when you start to see these high levels of shorts, you got to remember, ultimately all of these positions need to be covered, which means these are buys that are setting up there. These are imminent buy orders that need to ultimately be filled. The hope for the shorts here is that these prices, these short positions, will be covered at much lower prices. But let's go take a look at the charts here. Sorry about the raspy voice there, guys. I got back from a weekend away from the charts, a lot of outdoors activity, and feeling the sinuses a little bit, but it was worth it. Absolutely worth it. And so looking at the charts here, this is the 4-hour view of Bitcoin on Bitmex, and you can see I've got two lines highlighted here, and we have been in this very tight, very choppy range here for the last couple of weeks, and then over the last several days that range has narrowed. And so with the upside being around that $6,600 mark, downside being around that $6,220 or so, and so it's just been choppy, very volatile here in this range. It looked like we were going to get a pretty decent sell-off. You saw the volume pick up here a couple of days ago, and then no follow-through, and it was very surprising to see that this just rallied right back up. And so that's good news for the bulls. And then yesterday we saw that big pop, breaking out of this range finally, and went straight to that first level that I had been watching on the upside as the first target of support. I said in my last video I'd be looking at around 6,900 as my first target. You can see it basically got there, just a few points shy of 6,900, and so we've since been pulling back. Normally I would say, hey, this is a great secondary entry point on this chart. Nice pullback on low volume, but it would not surprise me if prices just remain in this very narrow trading range here. But looking at the daily chart here, just kind of looking at the big picture, let me pull the volume off of this to make it cleaner here. You can see that we've been in just this very choppy kind of transition phase on the daily chart here following the big sell-off, right above key support levels. So you can see this 6K mark. You've seen a lot of buyers continue to show up when it pushes below 6,000, but we haven't seen any significant move for the month of August, at least for the last couple of weeks. It's just been very choppy, very narrow, not a lot of follow through. Last week we did see some good oversold bounce plays in some of the alts, but those have since fizzled down and just sitting quiet. And so just not a lot of action going on here in the crypto space for the last couple of days as far as follow through goes. But we are going to start to see some movement, hopefully, one way or the other. It'd be nice to see a trending market again, whether that's up or down, just to continue to see the market develop. Obviously, we all want to see the market go up and trend higher from here and establish a solid low here. And we very well could. This price action that we're seeing here, it feels very reminiscent of the type of price action we saw in late March, early April, which was followed by that subsequent big short squeeze and rally that kicked off after that. So it'll be interesting to see if we see a similar squeeze and follow through rally after tomorrow's news. Now, the interesting thing will be if there is a surprise approval of that ETF. Now, I'm not expecting that, and most people aren't, but in that event, that would be a huge catalyst for the markets, even though it's not a fully backed ETF, Bitcoin ETF. Just the notion of, hey, the SEC is starting to warm up to this type of financial instruments would just put a lot of wind behind the sails of this Bitcoin market here. So, but most people are not expecting that for a number of reasons. It probably is not gonna happen. So we'll just have to see what the reaction to the news is. That's the most important thing. Not so much the news, but the reaction to the news. So let's take a look at some of these alts. So first off, VeChain Thor. This made for a little bit of a trade yesterday, and it was nice to be in this trade when the Bitcoin news or the Bitcoin little pop happened, and it was nice to just be able to take some profits into some of that. You can see it's since starting to roll over. What I was looking at yesterday was this little bit of an ascending triangle that was forming, and we had a breakout here. So we were able to enter on an early trade here before the clear breakout, added to that trade around that 150 mark above that, and just kind of followed through. And when we had that BTC pop here, it was a good place to start taking some small gains. It was not a huge trade. You can see that, you know, peak to peak, this was maybe a quick 10% on a couple of hours, but that's really been it. There's been far and few in terms of follow through to the upside. There are a few names to keep an eye on here as these prices continue to develop, but for the most part, it's taking the cues off of BTC here. It was outperforming on the BTC chart, very similar pattern. If you look at VET BTC, you can see it also had an ascending triangle pattern with a quick breakout, but has since started to roll over. So not a lot of follow through to the upside there. A few other names that I'm watching right now. IOTA, very similar pattern here on this 1 hour chart. You can see a little bit of an ascending triangle starting to form here. A nice close above that 55-cent mark will start to signal a potential breakout here off of the lows. You can see this is the 4 hour chart. If we can clear this resistance, you got a pretty good space here above it, so it would make for a pretty decent little run to the upside. Another one I'm watching here is Ontology. And Ontology is getting very symmetrical, continues to coil up and tighten up in this pattern. Two levels that I'm watching here. First are the trend lines, of course, but on the downside, a break below, you know, this 205 level or so would kind of negate this pattern for me. On the upside, I want to see it get above this 252, 253 level, and that would start to signal some more breakout to the upside. Going to be looking at volume if it does break out, but this one's certainly one to be watching here as this pattern gets very narrow, and as expected with most of these names, a lot of it's just going to depend on what BTC does here over the next couple of days. And finally, Ethereum. You can see Ethereum is just really starting to roll over here, not looking too strong, and is not a good signal for the alts here. In my last update, I was talking about this 277 level breaking lower. We did break below that. It quickly bounced back, but hasn't seen a lot of follow through and just kind of remains in this very choppy range here at these lows. And it is feeling a little bit bearish. I mean, if you look at the bigger picture, the overall tone, it's just not strong. I mean, we had this big sell-off, huge bounce off the lows, but that was just really more of an oversold bounce right into that moving average on the 10-period exponential on the daily, and pulling back. Another attempt yesterday failed right at the 10 EMA again, and so just not looking particularly strong. Now the positive is it has made that higher daily low that I was looking for. Now we want to see some follow through, see if we can finally close above that. That would set this as a very strong higher low on the daily chart, but for now it's still a lower high until it breaks out above this little bit of a resistance zone. And so overall, Ethereum still looking relatively weak from the big picture perspective. The trend is certainly still downward. It is trying potentially to reverse here, but until we see some confirmation, got to lean on the side of the bears on this one. There's a few other names that do look stronger here off the lows. Let me go through those very quickly here. Walton, still marching higher, moving off the lows there, going to that 4 hour chart. You can see it just continues to edge higher. Nano has been another name that has been stronger than most off of this low. You can see Nano is still stair-stepping its way higher, making higher highs and higher lows. That one's looking good. And of course, Link, which has been one of the stronger names anyway over the last couple of months, or the last couple of weeks, has already been trending higher for about a month now, and this one just continues to move its way up. Going to that daily chart here, you can see it's up significantly from the absolute low here at the bottom, already up about 127%. So there are still some names that are strong and bucking the trend here, but that's always the case. But for the most part, the overall market still very much under pressure and just kind of somewhat range bound here. Going to the coin market cap, you can see here for the last 3 months after this slide, we've just kind of been chopping around here since finding a low a couple of weeks ago and just sitting tight here at this low $200 billion range. So not a lot of upward movement all around. Obviously, a big portion of this is Bitcoin, which is now at 53% of the market cap dominance. And so just going to influence this overall number. If you look at the only altcoin number, it's sitting at around $100 billion, which makes sense. 53% is BTC. So you factor that out, and you're going to be left with $100 billion of everything else, excluding Bitcoin. And so just sitting tight for the most part, trying to find that low. We did have that spike low on August 14th. And since then, just kind of chopping around, meandering here at these lows. So want to see some follow through now, establish that as a good solid low. But for now, it's going to be a very news driven, very Bitcoin driven environment. People are hopeful for Q4. This last 3 months, no doubt, has been brutal. It's already been a bear market for all of 2018, but it just seems like June, July, and now August have just been the roughest part of that little bit segment there. That trading has been certainly tough during this period of time, and the trend has been predominantly downward. So really the best trades have been to the downside if you're taking short positions. Otherwise, just kind of sitting tight, waiting it out. There's been some pretty good oversold bounces, but those have been short-lived for the most part. Looking at some news items here, yesterday the New York Times did publish an article talking about hard lessons for cryptocurrency investors. And you know, just reading this story, you feel bad for a lot of these folks, but I'm afraid that this narrative is just all too common among cryptocurrency traders and investors. Maybe some of you guys have also experienced similar percentage losses. You're talking about moves from, you know, he invested 23,000, it's now worth 4,000. And some of the numbers are much bigger. You read about a mother who took out loans, who scraped together some money, and has since, you know, seen her investments, speculation, drop significantly. So $90,000, she's since lost 90% of that. And so a lot of people have certainly been burned by this. Reading these type of articles, it's going to do a lot of damage in terms of keeping new people away from crypto, keeping some of the folks that have not yet invested, and they're going to read this. Traditional investors certainly jump right on these type of articles and say, see, that's why you don't invest in Bitcoin, that's why you don't invest in crypto. And so I'm still a long-term bull, but no doubt there are some lessons to be learned here, especially borrowing money to invest at a market top after it's gone up thousands of percents, and just, you know, over leveraging, FOMO. There's a lot of good lessons to be learned here, and I know a lot of you guys have certainly felt the pain as the market has dropped, but this is going to be an interesting article to kind of keep tabs of. These articles tend to come out at the extremes. You know, the New York Times posted an article in January talking about how everyone was getting rich off of crypto and you're not, and pretty much marked the top of the market. So I will be keeping tabs on this article to see, in hindsight of course, how close to the low this article came out. And so just something to be checking out. I'll put a link to this if you didn't catch it. It's a pretty good read, a little bit pessimistic of course, but something to certainly check out if you have time. So that's going to be it for today, guys. We'll see how the market goes tomorrow. Most likely I will be doing a live stream, and as always, I appreciate you guys watching, appreciate you being here. If you're new to the channel, please remember to subscribe and hit that like button. Until next time, take care everyone.